Stephen, let me just explain how the evening's going to run. Obviously, we're using the Teams webinar feature for this event, and that means that we are recording the event. So if you don't want to be recorded, I would advise you keep your camera off and your microphone off. It's an interactive event, being a webinar, so there will be opportunities to ask questions, and I'll explain how we're going to do that in a moment. So the way it's going to work is Stephen is going to give a presentation using PowerPoint. About halfway through that presentation, we're going to pause and open the floor up to questions. And there are two ways to ask questions this evening. You can either write your questions into the chat box, which you'll find behind the little speech bubble on the top of your screen, or you can hold your question, and when we open the floor up to questions, you can put your hand up, which you'll find if you click on the little smiley face with the waving hand, and I will take your question and open the floor up, or Nevin will open the floor up so that you can ask your question in person. If you post your question in the chat box, I'm happy to read it out on your behalf if you so wish, or if you'd like to ask the question, just say, I'd like to ask this question. Once we've covered all of those questions, we'll go on to the second half. Stephen will talk to us a bit more with Joe, and then we will finish and have another question and answer session at the end. So I think that's enough in terms of the introduction from me, because you're not here to listen to me banging on all evening. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Stephen. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much indeed. It's very good to be here. I hope I can give you an interesting overview of the North Western IFCA. And the first thing I need to do is share my screen. Has that now come through? Can you see that? I can't see me anymore, but I can see the presentation. I need to go down here and find out how to start the presentation, which can't quite see. Oh, that might do to start off with. It's not the first one. Okay. Right, well, yeah, we'll start here. Yes, so we're talking about North Western Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority this evening. As Stuart said, there should be plenty of time for questions later on. I hope to give time for that. So by all means, store up your questions and come back probably after slide 19. I've got about 35 slides, so there's quite a lot, but we don't have to use all of them. If you'd rather ask questions and talk, we can spend more time doing that later. We'll see how it goes. The topics that I'm thinking to cover are in this list here. Talk about the general overview of IFCAs around the country. There are 10 of them, as I'm sure many of you will know. And then to talk a little bit about North Western IFCA, our district structure, staff and assets. We'll come on to something about the bylaws that we operate, our enforcement program, which, as Stuart said, is Joe's responsibility, and he'll be able to answer questions in relation to that sort of regulatory activity that we do. We'll say something about marine protected areas, of which we have a lot. Something about some bass research, which we have active in the Northwest. Something about recreational sea angling strategy, which I guess will be dear to your interests. Bait collection is quite a big issue up here. Not a problem, but it is important. And then there's a section on reporting offences and contacts. So that's there's a lot to get through. And as I say, we don't necessarily have to do it all this evening. If we want to postpone some of it for a future event, then we can do. I understand Angling Trust are thinking of holding these sorts of events again in the future, and we can bring in other experts as well, like Joe, like our science team, some of our IFCOs if necessary. We've got various people who can contribute information to because you're obviously interested in promoting the North West IFCA, telling people about what we do and getting a higher profile. So For those who don't know, perhaps if you haven't been to any of these before, as we heard, there are 10 IFCAs, and you can see them there on the map. And I understand there's been one of these forums in all the IFCAs, one for Cornwall and Scillies together, but apart from that, the other 9 have been done individually. They were founded in 2011. They replaced the old system of sea fisheries committees, which had been in place since 1890. So there's a long history of this sort of local management of fisheries around England. It's quite a unique system. The local accountability that came with the sea fishery committees and was passed on to the IFCAs in 2011. 10 around England. List them there. All I'm not going to go through all those headings, but there are 10. In Scotland and Wales, marine management devolved to their own governments. You may know that prior to 2011, with Sea Fishery Committee, we had North Western and North Wales, and so the district that I operate now was the Northwest, but not including Cumbria, and right down through Wales to middle of Cardigan Bay was the North Western North Wales Sea Fishery Committee. But in 2010, that all got devolved into the Welsh Assembly, and we set up IFCAs in the Northwest. Scotland have always made their own arrangements. They don't have the same level of local coastal management in Scotland as we do in England and Wales. So moving on, a vision statement. This was written by DEFRA. I think it's a bit wordy and a bit complicated, but it is the vision statement we've had since IFCAs were set up in 2011 to lead, champion and manage a sustainable marine environment and inshore fisheries by successfully securing the right balance between social, environmental and economic benefits to ensure healthy seas, sustainable fisheries and a viable industry. Obviously a lot in that. I'm not going to go into any detail about what it might mean to me or to you at this stage, but it's something we could talk about if you want to later. So we'll move on. This IFCA, Northwestern IFCA, you can see on the map there, extends from the border with Wales in the Dee in the south up to the border with Scotland in the Solway in the north. There was the Cumbria Sea Fishery Committee. Many of you might remember it was led by Chief Officer Dave Dobson, based in Whitehaven, where the vessel is marked there. We still have our northern office in Whitehaven, and the district extends right down to the Dee, and it runs out to 6 nautical miles. That's the boundary of the hatched area that you can see there, the 6 nautical mile limit, and to the tidal extent of estuaries. In fact, IFCA bylaws and IFCA regulations apply in any area where you can catch the fish in the district. So if there are marine areas extending inland and marine species there, then IFCA bylaws apply as far as the tidal extent, or as far as you can find marine resources. So that's the district. You can see we've got the main patrol boat lives there in Whitehaven. Can you see my arrow there if I move it about? Our office in Carnforth is down here on the east side of Morecambe Bay, and we've got other regional offices as well. There's an officer works in Barrow in Furness, and a couple of officers down in the Mersey, in the Liverpool area near the Mersey. So we've got quite good coverage of the district. I'll come on to what vessels and assets we have in a minute. So moving on, just talk about a bit about the authority a little, the Northwest IFCA Committee. I don't know whether we've got any members of the committee here tonight. Make yourself known if you are. I'd be interested to know if we've got any members. The committee is 30 members, which is a very large committee, as you can imagine. Meetings can be a bit of a handful when you've got up to 30 members there. And it's made up of 10 from the constituent local authorities. Now we cover 8 local authorities with coastal areas in their local authority areas. Eight of them cover the district. but we have 10 members because the two biggest ones, Lancashire and Cumbria, they have 2 members from each. So that's 10 members, as it were, elected members. They're all councillors. And then there's 17 appointed on merit, as it were, by the MMO. And you might have heard that there are occasionally calls for applications for people to become members of IFCAs, not just North West, but any of the other IFCAs as well. Anyone is welcome to apply. If you've got something you think you can contribute or you'd like to be on an IFCA, this one or any of the others, as I say, you can apply through the MMO when there's a call for members. At the moment, we haven't any vacancies, but for quite a number of years during over the last 10 or 12 years that we've been in existence, we have had vacancies and there have been opportunity for people to apply. So invitations to apply are usually on the MMO website, and they'll be on our website as well. So if you're interested, that will be a way in. So as I say, 17 members appointed by the MMO, 10 from councils and 3 statutory appointees, 1 from the Environment Agency, 1 from the MMO, Marine Management Organisation, and 1 from Natural England. It's up to them who they send as their representative, but they have 1 statutory seat at all the meetings. Sometimes they don't vote. They consider them independent, the agencies, so that they're not exerting any excessive control or anything over the IFCA, but they do have a role in making sure we comply with laws and regulations as they apply to those agencies. So the 17 MMO appointees, they can come from any backgrounds really across society, but the MMO are looking for people who come from fisheries sectors, any fisheries sectors, including angling. We have some angling members already. From industry, marine industry and environmental sectors, as I say, even from voluntary. They don't have to have a particular role relevant to our remit, but if they do, then it helps. And obviously they are invited for interview when appointments are made and appointed by the MMO, not by us. We don't have any say in who is appointed, and that's entirely the role of the Marine Management Organisation. So we have 4 statutory meetings a year. That's set out in the standing order that set up the North West IFCA in 2010. So we're quarterly main meetings. All the papers and the minutes from those meetings are put on our website. It should be easy enough to find, but if you have any trouble, you can always contact our office in Carnforth or Whitehaven, and they will direct you to where the papers can be found on the website. So you can look at the latest things that are being discussed through tracking down these papers. At the moment, we're working on papers for a September meeting, September this year. December. We had the September meeting last. The next one is December. And at the moment, we're preparing the papers for that meeting. They'll go on the website a week before the meeting. The meeting is in early December. I could give you the date if I just check my diary, the exact date in case you want to attend. Scrabbling with my diary. Papers need to go out the 29th of November, and the meeting is on the 9th of December. So the next quarterly meeting is the 9th of December if anyone wants to attend. And we have another set of public meetings as well. Probably come to that in the next slide. We talk about the TSB, the Technical Science and Byelaws Committee. They also have meetings every quarter. Yes, here we are, Technical Science and Byelaws Subcommittee. It's probably the most important subcommittee in the authority. It takes a lot of the main fisheries management decisions. So 8 members elected from the authority, that's out of the 30 by the other authority members. The 3 statutory bodies have seats on the TSB as well. Chair and vice chair of the main authority are on it. So that's 12 members, 13 members. And it deals with technical issues, directing the drafting of bylaws, scientific work, conservation work, opening and closing of fisheries, and so on. TSB is responsible for all those things. Bylaws are approved by the TSB, and they must also be approved by the full authority, but our bylaws are actually ministerial bylaws. They become part of national legislation once they're signed into law by the minister. But there's extensive consultation before that happens. So you may have been aware sometimes of IFCA bylaws being advertised, being open to consultation, and having an opportunity to comment on them. We could obviously go into bylaw work in a great deal of detail if you want to have any questions about that. So moving on, we have 21 members of staff across the district, which you can see the district's a couple of 100 miles long, a very extensive area, and 21 members of staff. We make good use of them. They work hard. We could always use a lot more, but we can do a good job with those 21 members of staff, I believe. They consist of admin officers, IFCOs, so that there's 2 admin officers and 7 IFCOs, and the boat crew. They're based up in Whitehaven with the main patrol vessel and another patrol vessel. And then I'm in Carnforth with Joe, the head of enforcement, the science team, four members of the science team, and other administration officers based in Carnforth. And there's also three IFCOs who work from home across the district. And all that means that we can work quite efficiently and locally. We're not wasting any more sort of on fuel and travel than we need to, and I think it is quite useful to have that local knowledge as well, because IFCOs, Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Officers, are usually very well informed. Once they're well into their job, they're well informed about the fishing activity and marine activity going on in their patch, the patch that they cover. So they're the staff. That's the staff we work with. As regards assets, as I've said, main patrol vessel is based in Whitehaven. It's called the North Western Protector. I've got some pictures of that coming up in a minute. We actually have 4 RIBs, rigid inflatable boats, with those exotic names there that you can see. And we use those for local sea patrols. Very active one down in the Mersey, one up in Whitehaven, one in Barrow, and one also a small rib in Morecambe Bay, very useful for getting in the shallow water and the channels around Morecambe Bay, as a Zodiac type vessel. So those are our vessels, and we also have a lot of quad bikes compared with any other IFCA that I know of, because our district is very distinctive because it comprises large estuarine areas, large bays that empty at low water, not just Morecambe Bay, also the Wirral estuary, the Mersey, just big intertidal areas, the Dee in the south. And we find actually we're doing a lot of our activity using quad bikes rather than boats, because of the amount of shore that dries out. And I think we're about a dozen quad bikes across the district in total. So this is North Western Protector. We acquired her in 2018, not new, I must say, but overhauled and refurbished. 20 meters long, MAN engines. If you're interested in the technical details, our engineer and skipper could give you a lot of information about engines and power. Jet drives, water jets, not props. The cruising speed 23 knots, so she's quite quick. She can go up to about 30 knots actually if you really put your foot down. It has a large foredeck with a crane, which is useful for transporting quad bikes, and we can quite quickly get quad bikes out onto like areas of Morecambe Bay, for example, and offload them for survey work and sampling as needed. So we can. It is quite useful to have that size of boat. coded to work up to 60 miles from a safe haven, if you understand Marine and Coast Guard Agency type coding for commercial vessels. And she also carries a small rib protector Charlie, a 5-meter aluminium vessel on the back, and a stern ramp, and that can just very easily be launched from the back of North Western Protector to carry out smaller scale sampling and survey work in shallow inshore areas. So that's probably enough on North Western Protector for now. There's a picture at her launch, nicely decked out with bunting and based there. She's berthed in Whitehaven as a rule. It's usually to be found there. She was a wind farm supply vessel before we acquired her, and so she's quite powerful and quite effective, I think. Moving on, another view of North Western Protector. If you've got any questions, come back to those later. And that is the skipper. You might know Skipper Hugh Tinnison, based in Whitehaven. He's been the skipper of the IFCA since we were founded, and before that, I don't know how long he was skipper of the Cumbria Sea Fishery Committee, but it's certainly a long service. Right, let's move on from the kit then to the bylaws, and just a summary there of the current situation with our bylaws. The IFCA was formed, as I said, from the Cumbria Sea Fishery Committees and the North Western Sea Fishery Committee, and that has created a north-south split in legacy bylaws. We inherited all the bylaws from both sea fishery committees, and we haven't yet managed to resolve them all into a single group of bylaws, IFCA bylaws, but we are working on that. Yeah, we have a bylaw book which you can find on the website with all the full bylaws set out in detail. There are complications that arise because we have acquired bylaws from Cumbria and North Western Sea Fisheries. We've also acquired bylaws actually from the Environment Agency and previous river authorities as well that have to be resolved. So the situation is quite complicated. And an example there is included in the problems with our bylaws is that all pots require an escape gap. In the Cumbria Sea Fishery Committee, there was a bylaw which required the escape gaps, but that didn't apply in the North West Sea Fishery Committee area. So there are slight differences in the regulations in the north and south of the district. And at present, as I say, there's a bylaw book easily acquired from the website, 6 North West IFCA bylaws, so they're ones that have been made since we became an IFCA, and 47 legacy bylaws from those other 3 sources, the Cumbria Sea Fishery Committee, the North Western Sea Fishery Committee, and the Environment Agency and river authorities. So the bylaw situation is complicated, and it is taking a long time to resolve all the different bylaws. Happy to talk about that in more detail, and Joe will as well, I'm sure, if need be. So moving on. Bylaw review going on at the moment. We are reviewing all the legacy bylaws, trying to replace them with district-wide IFCA bylaws. It's not just we want to tidy up, although that is important. There are changes in the way bylaws are written, the things that they can cover and the jobs they can do. And so it is important to refresh bylaws as often as we can. We usually try and review a bylaw every 4 or 5 years, although a lot get left longer than that. If they're working well and there aren't any serious problems with them, they may continue. But we do try and review our bylaws every few years, as I say. We prioritize them based on need and risk. So if there's an enforcement problem that needs to be sorted, we will try and develop a bylaw to address that problem. We're not just doing them because, as I say, we want a tidy regulatory regime and a nice looking bylaw book. We are using them to address specific needs and risks, enforcement needs and risks that are taking place in the district, and we think need to be addressed. And there's a wide consultation as well for all new bylaws to make sure others agree that we're doing the right thing. And it's one of the main roles of the committee is that the authority itself, that is the members, is to look at the regeneration of bylaws and the preparation of new ones. They do have to, the bylaws need to be backed up with evidence. There has to be a demonstrable need for a bylaw and evidence that a bylaw will fix the problem, whatever it might be. And sometimes the review of the current bylaws is slowed down by the need to legislate to manage new risks, and we've had a few examples of like that where that has happened. You might be aware of the problems that we had down on the Wirral last year. I think somewhat related to COVID and the fact that people had a lot of leisure. We found there was a lot of recreational fishing for shellfish down on the Wirral, to the extent that stocks were getting quite seriously hammered. And so we brought in an emergency bylaw to stop that happening, basically to prohibit the removal of all bivalve shellfish from the beach on the Wirral at Lizo. And that has been quite successful, and we're just converting that into a full bylaw. When you start with an emergency bylaw, that can be brought in very quickly, but you then need to work on producing a full, properly worded, detailed bylaw, which will go into the bylaw book. You need to do that within about 18 months. So we're trying to do that at the moment for the fisheries down, the shellfishes down on the Wirral. Probably I'll stop there for bylaws just at the moment. Perhaps it's something you might like to come back to, I expect. Where have we got to numbers wise? That's the one I was just talking about, the emergency bylaw on the Wirral coast. We had a large increase in bivalve mollusk gathering on the North Wirral coast. We couldn't have foreseen it, and that's why we were allowed to make an emergency bylaw. We can't just make one, on a whim. There has to be evidence that it's needed, and it has to be something that we could not have reasonably have foreseen. If we could have foreseen it, they'll say, well, we should have brought in a bylaw earlier, and we can't make an emergency bylaw. We can still make a full bylaw, but that takes a lot more time. But in this case, it was a surprise that there was suddenly a big influx of people gathering shellfish on the beach there, and we were able to bring in an emergency bylaw. We need DEFRA to give consent to introduce an emergency bylaw. Again, it's not just North West IFCA acting on its own. It has to be referred up to the government. It met the criteria, as in the fourth bullet there. We now have a bylaw banning gathering bivalve mollusks in the area, and an emergency bylaw, and we've applied for a full bylaw to have it in place as soon as we can. If you want to see the draft one, that will be in the papers, in various papers, and if you wanted to find out exactly, you contact our office, and they will direct you to the papers if you can't find it. We're continuing with stock surveys on the Wirral and at Lizo to inform the need for future measures. But I think there will be an ongoing need for regulation of shellfish gathering in that area. Okay. Coming on to enforcement now, talking about the role of inshore fisheries and conservation officers, IFCOs. They're warranted officers. They're able to enforce local, national, international sea fisheries legislation within the district, and they have a legal warrant to do that. The legislation that IFCOs can enforce is listed in section 166 of the Marine and Coastal Access Act. I won't attempt to go through that in detail, although I have got some notes if you want more details, but you can look at that. Might be best if you want to know more detail about what we can actually enforce, then perhaps you can come back to Joe or one of the other IFCOs outside this meeting. Sometimes we can cross-warrant IFCOs with another organisation to enforce further legislation. that's particularly true, I think, of the Marine Management Organisation, who they have their fishery officers have different legislation to enforce different fisheries because they go out to 12 miles, and sometimes we can work jointly with them through this process of cross-warranting. But again, we have to ensure that warrants are properly issued and our officers and their officers are properly qualified and warranted to address legislation under both organisations. Okay. Well, I have got a brief summary of the main powers here. If you want to go through them, actually there's a column on the left which I'm not seeing here, but I'm pretty sure it's in the table that tells you the section of the MACA, the Marine and Coastal Access Act, which gives us all these separate powers and duties. So we have powers to board and inspect vessels and marine installations to carry out relevant functions. And similarly, we can enter and inspect premises, stop, enter and inspect vehicles, enter dwellings, need a court warrant for that, search premises, vessels, marine installations, whatever, and so on and so forth. We have these powers. If our IFCOs, our fishery officers, they're warranted to enforce these powers and qualified to do so by the warrant that they have. We obviously meet a lot of people who are very unsure of what the powers of fishery officers are. They don't necessarily believe they have any powers, and our powers are limited. For example, we don't have powers of arrest. So if a fishery officer tries to arrest you, he can't do that. But we can seize items if we believe they have been used to commit an offence. We can require a name and address to identify the person, and so on and so forth. So our IFCOs are quite highly trained and qualified to enforce all these powers and duties, not to the extent of the police perhaps, although slightly different from the police, I guess, but nevertheless they do have important enforcement functions. And last one there, we can direct a vessel or a marine installation into port if necessary. So we can require a vessel, if we think an offence is being committed, we can require a vessel to return to port. Okay, right. Now, bass has been quite an issue for enforcement over the last couple of years or so. You're perhaps aware of the Heysham Bass Nursery area, which is in the waters around the power station at Heysham, the outfall waters, and the sort of slightly elevated temperature of the water tends to generate quite strong bass populations in that nursery area. But fishing is prohibited in the bass nursery area, and we find ourselves regularly called on to enforce that. We've issued all those warning letters, fixed administrative penalties, and had quite a number of successful prosecutions as well for fishing in that bass nursery area. And we see it as important for the protection of bass and the encouragement of the bass stocks to develop. It's important to enforce that as much as we can. Right, and at that point, I think we said I would take a break and invite questions from anyone if you want to put them just now. Is that right? Are there any questions for us yet?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, we'll pause there, and we have had a couple of questions in the chat box. I see quite a few people joined after we started. So just to clarify, if you have any questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat box, and I will refer them to Stephen or indeed to Joe. Or if you want to put your hand up, I'm happy to, or Nevin will open up the floor and allow you to ask the questions in person. But as I said, we've had two, Stephen. So the first one is from Tony Hills, and he has asked, would you say the membership of your IFCA reflects the balance of interests within the IFCA district?
He presumably means the balance of fishing interest, does he, or wider environmental interests? It kind of depends what you mean by the balance of interests. What we try and do is have members representing the fisheries environment, the wider marine environment, business and industry, and a number of other sort of sectors like that. And at the moment, I must confess, I don't think we represent it all that well. Over the years, there has been a problem with getting applications to be members of the IFCA. And I'm saying, you know, when there are vacancies, if you're interested in coming on, you think you might have something to contribute, by all means apply through the MMO, because I don't think I think we're slightly unbalanced probably towards fisheries interests, perhaps particularly shell fisheries interests, because they're obviously predominant fisheries in our district, the cockles and mussels and the shrimps and the crabs and the lobsters and so on, all those fisheries. And particularly cockles and mussels are perhaps overrepresented on the authority, but it has been difficult to get a balance of membership. We can only take the ones that apply, or MMO can only appoint people who apply, and we frankly need more people to apply. Does that get to the root of the question, do you think?
I'm sure it does, but if not, I'm sure Tony will come back for clarity. In fact, has Tony put his hand up? Yes, Tony has put his hand up. So Tony, Nevin, I don't know if you can unmute Tony to ask a supplementary.
I hope I've done that. Tony, do you want to have a
go? Thanks, Nevin. Well done. Yes, Stephen. I mean, I'm a member of Kent Essex IFCA, and we have a lot of shellfish down there, as you might be aware, a lot of cockles down there as well.
Yeah,
and I find it reflects, a lot of these IFCAs now reflecting the commercial interests, because they're the ones that want to be on board the IFCAs, strangely enough. And I've seen a drop off of recreational anglers and sports type angling of members in the IFCAs, and also it seems to me there's fewer wildlife people about, for what I've seen, but they're getting more and more dominated by those with commercial interests. I was just interested, not knowing anything about the North Western. It's a lovely big area you got there, but if it reflects your concern that people don't want to do things for free anymore.
Yes, I think I fully agree with your concern there. It applies to us, I think, as much as it applies to Kent and Essex. I'm not really totally aware of their situation, but obviously they have the big Thames cockle fisheries, and then they have fishery orders as well, don't they? So yeah, I wasn't aware that it was a problem in their area as well. I think yes, it is a problem, and I don't know how we get over it. We have quite a few recreational fishers, I must say. Not sure there's been any on the call tonight. For example, I know Brian Lee, for example, very active sea angler. He wanted to come tonight, but I think he's got another meeting and isn't able to come. And we have had one or two anglers fairly consistently over the years that we've been in business, as it were. But I think we could do with more from the environmental sector. And more from like a science sector. I think it would be very good to have some university people who have that sort of expertise in the marine environment, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. And then we've got a question from Michael. And Michael has asked, can you please clarify your recent move to allowing shore netting? Sorry, that just moved. Shore netting for bass. I read your officers were concerned that it could conflict with EU regulations.
Okay, I mean, is he talking about the new SI that DEFRA have introduced to allow shore netting and to allow bass to be taken from some shore nets? That is an SI that we can't enforce in our district. We can't apply or enforce in our district at all. Joe, can I ask Joe if he can come in and maybe comment on this as well?
Yeah, please do.
You there, Joe?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm just going to have a look at the question. Yes, I think, I'm guessing Michael is alluding to some media that was put out there regarding shore netting for bass. This is we have had issues and discussions with DEFRA regarding this, as we do believe that the statutory instrument is in conflict with our regulations, and at the moment we haven't issued any permits which would we believe that we have the legislative framework to do so.
We missed the crucial bit of what you said in that last section, Joe.
So as our IFCA, we don't believe that we have the legislative framework currently to issue any permits to fish for bass. So we haven't done this as we believe this national regulation is in conflict with our local legislation.
Yeah, we've certainly discussed this with DEFRA, and we've asked them to try and resolve the situation, but they have, to my mind, they have persisted in issuing this bass SI, which is unenforceable. It's inoperable from our point of view, because we have no mechanism to issue the permits which the SI purports to allow. Perhaps you know it purports to allow, I think it's 26 permits to take bass from shore set nets. We have no mechanism to issue those permits, and so we're completely stuck with it. I mean, we would certainly do so if we could, but we can't, because we don't have any legislation to do it. Okay, does that cover that one?
I think so. Michael's come back with a clarity. So if I just read that out, he said, well, if as the IFCA you are reauthorising shore netting for bass, how do you reconcile doing so with the current government advice, which states that net caught bass must be bycatch, given your own officers are on record as stating the fishery is a direct targeted fishery for bass? Doesn't authorising a fishery against government advice risk bringing the North West IFCA into disrepute?
My view, I think I'm right, Joe, that we authorise shore set netting, but we don't authorise the taking of bass. Do you want to add to that, Joe?
That's correct, Stephen. It's kind of slightly the other way around. We do issue permits for people to fish using nets, and it's the government regulation that states that bass could be caught by bycatch, and we are not issuing permits to land bass as bycatch. We do believe that is a misinterpretation of that term, that bass caught in nets would not be bycatch, and potentially would be a targeted fishery.
And
so we're saying, as I said before, because
I was just going to say that if you're stuck with DEFRA over this, I can give you a contact for the SI in DEFRA, and I've told them that I'm going to share this contact because of the impossible position they've put us in regarding this statutory instrument that they published just about a month ago.
Okay, I think that would be really helpful, because I know this is causing quite a lot of debate and discussion all around the country about this SI that they've produced. Okay, we don't have any more questions at this stage. I'm pleased to say that Caroline is one of our guests this evening, and she has said that she, as a recreational angler, is watching this with interest. So welcome, Caroline. Oh no, Tony's come back with another one. Tony wants to ask his normal question. As you can see, Tony's been on a number of these, and he's always very welcome on these forums. And he'd like to ask a question on climate change, how this process is seeing a change in the balance of availability of local species. So how are you seeing the species shift within your IFCA district because of climate change?
Well, I'm not an expert on this. This is kind of a international issue that we can't comment on or in a way we can't contribute to it directly, although we will try and assist with implementing the climate change policies that the government seeks to put out. But I suppose bass is perhaps quite a good example of a species which does seem to have moved north, probably in relation to the warming of the climate. And there are other species as well where their distribution has changed, probably related to changes in the climate. That's the sort of thing that we're trying to monitor and keep tabs on. Okay, thanks. And maybe if I could sort of abuse my position a bit and ask a related question. Obviously, as an IFCA, you're almost in a bit of a unique position with as an IFCA compared to all of the others, in that you border Scotland in the north and Wales in the south. How much work do you do, or how much cooperation do you do between those two evolved administrations around shared stocks and transient stocks that are passing through the district? Do you work closely with those two devolved administrations? We do work closely on specific issues, really, as they come up. They both have very different fisheries management regimes, and they're both much more centralised in terms of the Welsh government and the Scottish government. So I wouldn't say we have like day to day or week to week meetings even. But we do collaborate, for example, in regard to management of the Dee and the cockle fishery there. We are always available. Our officers are available to assist with survey work and enforcement relating to that cockle fishery on the border with Wales. I don't suppose we do as much as we should with regard to collaboration and partnership working with Wales and Scotland. We are available. We're looking, we're very open to need and opportunities. Again, I'm going to ask Joe actually if he wants to comment on that, because it's likely he would be the one at the sharp end when the issues come up. I know you've done quite a few joint patrols with Wales in particular, Joe, not so much with Scotland, perhaps. Can you say something about that? If he's there.
Absolutely. So, we don't actually just work jointly with Marine Scotland and Welsh Government, but we tend to actually more recently operate as a whole around the Irish Sea. So we work jointly with Isle of Man Fisheries, with DARA in Northern Ireland, with the Marine Management Organisation, as well as the two devolved administrations which border our district. And this is particularly for enforcement purposes really crucial to be able to lead on intel-led and tasked approach to fisheries enforcement in the Irish Sea as a whole.
Thanks for that, Joe. Okay, I've got one last question and then I think we should move on. And this is from Neil, who is a recreational angler as well, and says there's been a large depletion of flounder stocks in the south, certainly from what Neil has seen over the last 20 years. How are the stocks in your area faring?
I don't think I've any up-to-date information on that. I don't know whether you can say anything about flounder, Joe.
Nothing at current on flounder as a species in isolation. I'm certainly quite happy to take any if Mr. Jones would like to get in touch via email. We can certainly speak to our science department, see if there's any data on that.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, there'll be another opportunity for questions at the end, but I'm conscious of the time, so I think we should hand back to Stephen and carry on with the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, I've moved on the slide to this one is about our science officers and our science team. We do have quite an intense, quite a busy survey program during the course of the year, mostly for our cockles and mussels and shellfish around the district. So we survey and assess fish stocks, cockles and mussels particularly, shrimp sometimes, and other shellfish. We ensure fisheries comply with national, international legislation. We advise the Technical Science and Byelaws Committee of any work that needs to be done to make sure that fisheries are compliant with rules and regulations. We explore the sustainability of future potential fisheries. We've got a team of 4 science officers, incidentally, who carry out this work. One vacancy at the moment, which will be advertised quite soon. If somebody would like to come and who's got science experience, a science degree, something like that, and any experience in fisheries, by all means apply when it comes out. We should have an advert on our website in the near future. We assist external partners with information requests related to fisheries as far as we can, and we work with external partners on joint studies, joint research where possible as well. So it is a busy science program that we have. More details of it in our annual plan. If you want to look at what we do, find the annual plan. And also there is a science report to each quarterly meeting, so you can see the sort of work that they're up to. I mean, over the summer, over summer 2021, been a very busy program of surveying all the cockles and mussel stocks in Morecambe Bay, and opening suitable cockle fisheries where there was enough, although cockle stocks seem to be in decline at the moment generally. So we hope we'll be able to arrest that. And there are steady mussel fisheries going on, and we monitor those as well. So we can certainly ask more about the science program if you're interested. Moving on from that, so the other thing that the science team do, they look after marine protected areas within the district and the sort of science and survey needs of that. You can see from that map, I'm rather pleased with that map, which a GIS officer did for us a couple of years ago, because it shows the extent of marine protected areas that we have in our district. People don't always realise that special areas of conservation, special protection areas for birds, marine conservation zones. These are marine protected areas where fishing and marine activities and fishing activities can be restricted and is restricted under our bylaws to protect these marine protected areas. And you can see 78% of our district by area, almost the entire coastline is marine protected area of one sort or another. There's a small gap there, just near the south side of Morecambe Bay, which doesn't fall in any protected area. That's about the only bit of the coastline that doesn't. And we have European marine sites under Habitats Directive and Birds Directive, the special protection areas, special areas of conservation. And the marine conservation zones was a new designation which was brought in under the Marine and Coastal Access Act 2009. And quite a number, they're the orange ones, that they have been designated since 2009. A lot of these protected areas are underpinned as sites of special scientific interest, SSSIs, but not all of them, and Ramsar sites as well. So very complicated picture of marine protected areas, about to get more complicated, I expect, with highly protected marine areas, which the government is considering at the moment, although we don't yet know where sites are going to be. So happy to take questions on marine protected areas. Move on from there just now. Just to clarify the details of what they are: SPAs designated under Birds Directive to protect a whole range of bird species of European importance, and the list is in Annex 1 of the directive, and there are many of the species in our district, oyster catcher, not just two examples of birds which are protected under the SPA regime. SACs are special areas of conservation under the Habitats Directive, also EU legislation to protect habitats and species of European importance. Reefs and seagrass beds are examples. Zostera beds are seagrass, and many other species as well are protected. And again, you can see the list of the species that are protected in Annex 1 and Annex 2 of the directive. And it is important that we try and manage the relationship between fisheries and protected features. We want to make sure that fishing can continue as much as possible, but any fishing activity has to be assessed to ensure that we can be confident that none of the protected features, none of the birds in SPAs, none of the species and habitats in the SACs, they won't be damaged by any of the fisheries activity. And to some extent, all this has come in since about 2010. In the sense, it's really begun to bite since then, and we have to write complicated assessments, habitats regulations assessments, before we can open any marine site in the district to any sort of fishery, to have a written account of our confidence that the protected sites won't get damaged. Moving on. Assessing commercial fishing within European marine sites, habitats regulations assessments, that's what I was talking about, HRAs as we call them. Commercial fisheries within European marine sites are assessed for their impact on the protected features and the protected habitats and species. It takes into account factors such as noise and removal of prey species, risk of entanglement if with netting and so on, damage from access, so human movement and travel and transport and so on, levels of activity all are considered in these habitats regulations assessment. If you want to see habitats regulations assessments, they're all on our website. There's a big load of them because they accumulate now at the rate of several a year. We have to write new ones for one site or another, one fishery or another, and these are all on our website if you want them. We collect a wide range of data, survey data, permit data, returns and activity, which all feeds into the habitats regulations assessment process. I mean, for example, this year we've opened cockle fisheries in Morecambe Bay, pilling sands, new biggin sands has been considered. Down at Liso, we've done HRA for fishery there to see what can be opened. And actually cockle stocks have been reducing this year, and we haven't been able to open as many as fishermen would have liked, but we do consider them and assess them for opening. And if there is an identified risk, management measures must be explored, and these can range from voluntary codes of practice right up to full-scale bylaws to prohibit activities which are damaging. So that's European marine sites and habitats regulations assessments, a very big part of our work now. And anyone who does come into the science team now to work for the North West IFCA will get involved in habitats regulations assessments, either the survey work or the writing of the assessments. You'll get involved in that to a greater or lesser extent. Coming on to bass, a little bit of research going on in the district, not really led by us, but led by CFAS. Aims to identify key uncertainties and data gaps to lead further study on bass. There has been persistent concern that bass stocks are under threat and at risk, and the minimum landing size of bass has been put up to 42 centimetres, so that's quite large now. There's been, and this particular study led by CFAS is a tagging study, and it has involved anglers. So 100 bass have been tagged with floating electronic data storage tags. Some have now been recovered, so we're starting to get data from them. And this poster talks about €100 reward for finding an electronic tag in a fish, on a fish, and returning it to get the data off it. So if you're a fisherman and you find a bass tag, please take special care to recover the tag and return it to CFAS as soon as you can. And we use the data, development of spatial and individual models to assess conservation strategies for sea bass. Obviously a very important species. In many ways, there do seem to be quite a lot of sea bass around in our district, but we're governed very much by national and international legislation, which restrict the extent to which they can be fished. So very important to apply all the rules and regulations on sea bass. That's just a blow up of the poster that was on the other one. That's the reward if you find a internal electronic tag attached to a sea bass that you catch. Okay, just a bit more of this work. We aim to listen to and understand concerns of regional bass stakeholders. This is all work done by CFAS, and it is continuing. I don't know whether anyone has been involved in it in this district. I think you probably will have heard of it and perhaps been invited to be involved. CFAS are aiming to gauge regional priorities for the conservation of sea bass, where conservation measures can have the greatest effect, really. Understand existing data gaps and support future work on bass. And now, what's the SBFCT? Not sure what that is. That must be in CFAS. They're engaged with more than 100 recreational and commercial fishers, trying to gather the information on levels of bass fishing and the amount of catch and so on that everyone's getting. I expect people will have questions about bass. There's further bass research, bass and ray ecology in Liverpool Bay, led by Bangor University. Preliminary study to provide evidence on population biology, stock structure and movement of both species, and identify possible spawning locations for bass. It would be very good to know if there are other nursery areas in the district which could be protected to try and encourage the development of bass stocks. The Wyre estuary, for example, has been identified as possibly worthy of further investigation as to whether it could be a bass nursery area and could merit designation as such. The bass caught in fisheries were mainly female, which could suggest localized spawning, and there's a full report of this research published online. Let's go on. Now, the importance of recreational sea angling. Number one, I'm sure you're familiar with all this information. This audience will be perhaps well aware of this, but I'll run through the information that we've got anyways. Fishing #1 sport by participation in the UK. Regional social media groups have over 12,000 members, and we are seeking to build up our database of bass, all recreational fishing, angling, and recreational sea angling. We're seeking to build up our database of contacts across our district, and I'm sure there is an online form where you can register your interest. If you can't find it, come back to our office, and they'll let you have it. Anglers, of course, you do have a wealth of knowledge. We're acknowledging that you do have a wealth of knowledge in relation to fish stocks, and an understanding coming from, you know, where and when you fish and what you catch, that can give us a lot of useful scientific data. And of course, contributing 1.5 billion to the UK economy, quite an astonishingly valuable activity in the UK is recreational sea angling. The recreational sea angling strategy, I guess you'll be familiar with this. Again, I'll run through some of the main points from it. It has aims to balance the needs of anglers with all other parties involved in exploitation of the sea. It aims to build a positive working relationship with anglers, to understand the needs and requirements of anglers and identify areas of conflict, recognise and maintain the social and economic benefits of the recreational sea angling sector, and put in place sustainable management of sea fishery resources where necessary. Really, the North West IFCA hasn't, we haven't put a lot of resources and effort into gathering data and information on sea angling. We gather as much as we can, and we have got quite a lot, but we kind of need involvement of a lot more fishermen, a lot more of the people who are active in the recreational sea angling sector. So we would welcome registrations from people who will give us information about where and when they fish and what they catch and so on. And this hopefully will lead to better management of recreational sea angling and better opportunities for you guys who are particularly interested in the sport and the hobby. The strategy, again, you're probably aware of it. We want to connect with and maintain communication with the angling sector as much as we can. We want to assess current information and collect as much new information as we can. As we've said, you have important scientific information to contribute, and we really want your data and your knowledge somehow to be established in our North West IFCA data records in our database. We want to understand better the social and economic importance of recreational sea angling for the district. Remembering that 1.5 billion, it's an input. It must be very important in the Northwest, but we don't have a good understanding of how important it is. We want to establish where conflicts arise. I'm not sure that there are a lot of conflicts associated with recreational sea angling, but we want to know what they are, where they are, and how we can resolve them. And what are the needs of sea anglers from regulators? What do you really want from us, including the IFCA? We'd be pleased to hear from you. Forums like this are very useful, I think, in trying to get more detail about how we can work together to promote sea angling and encourage sea angling and get good scientific information from the activity that takes place. So all IFCAs. Oh, well, okay, moved on to bait collecting now. We're finished with sea angling. Sorry, I thought there was another one. And so IFCAs have been asked by DEFRA to assess hand gathering and bait collection activities within all European marine sites. And we are doing that. We're certainly fairly well aware, I think, of the extent of bait collection taking place within the Northwest. This rather bland statement. Our current understanding suggests there are no issues. Well, I think that is probably true to the extent we haven't identified any management problems that need to be solved in respect of bait collection in the Northwest. There's obviously a lot goes on. But we're not aware that we need to manage it in any way. We don't need any new regulations or bylaws or anything to deal with bait collection. If you really disagree with that and you think we should be engaging in more management of bait collection, then let us know. But to support our decisions, we need further data. We do need to know why we need to have any further regulations or management of bait collection. So I mean, it's ideal, isn't it, if there isn't a problem and you can all go out and gather bait freely, as much as you like, wherever you like. And that generally is the position with regard to bait collection in the Northwest. We're quite fortunate in that respect. So if you have experience in bait collection, if you are active in bait collection, then we would welcome completion of this questionnaire that you can find online on our website. Send it in, and that will give us it will alert us to any problems that might need to be managed and we might need to take into account in the future. Right, I think we're on the home straight now. We do depend on the public for reporting of fishery offences to a large extent. So if you see any fishing activity that you think is suspicious or might be wrong in some way, please send in an email, ideally. The phone number is there, but of course the phone number isn't necessarily available 24 hours a day. We just don't have those resources. But email or leave a message on the phone, you can do that, and we will certainly include it. We have a weekly Intel review where we review all the information that's come in and take account of it. We share it with other agencies and other bodies around the district and further afield if necessary. It's very important that we are properly organised and disciplined with the way we manage intelligence as it comes in, because if you don't manage it properly, you can't make much use of it. Whereas if you do manage it properly, obviously it becomes usable for detection of offences and, if necessary, later prosecutions. And reports are all taken in strict confidence. The forms that you fill in, they're anonymized, and the only person who will know file the report is the officer you contact and our intelligence officer. We need to know the usual facts: who, what, where, and why, when. Those are the terms that we look for. That's the data that we seek to gather when having any information. Who was involved? What were they doing? Where was it? And when was it? That's the core summary of the information. The what three words, which are the who, what, where, and when, is a great tool to use. We can't discuss information about investigations that occurred as a result of your intelligence. That's important to realise, and that may be frustrating to a degree, that information can be fed in. But if we're going to get a successful prosecution of offences that are committed, it's very important that the whole investigation is strictly confidential, and we can't discuss it with anybody, because that would ruin the case, as it were. So I'm sure we all know now from the number of sort of police programs we see on television, but it's very important that it is kept confidential. We do work closely with other enforcement bodies, the MMO, Marine Management Organisation, the Gangmaster Licensing and Labour Abuse Authority, is the GLAA, and the local Environmental Health Department as well. Which very, very important for us in this district, because they regulate the sort of sanitary conditions on the beach, and assess the level of bacteriology, because that's very important and influential in allowing shell fisheries like cockles and mussels to take place. Reporting Chinese mitten crab, it's an unusual species. You can see it has very distinctive claws with sort of a bunch of hairs around each one, and those are the mittens in the name. We have found them in this district, but only occasionally. There doesn't seem to be an established population, fortunately, and we wouldn't want there to be. They can be very damaging, particularly to estuarine seawalls. They burrow very actively. They can travel a long way. Actually, they spend a lot of their life cycle not in the sea but on land, and at that time they can disperse very widely across the country. And if you do find a Chinese mitten crab, we really would like to know about it. These things, retain it if you can, put it in a secure box. If you can't retain it, record where you got it and what it was doing, and so on, all the details that you can, and report it to us, and it will be added to a database to try and build up a picture of a population of Chinese mitten crab across the country. It is important that we try and, it's an important species to try and control as much as we can. Other reporting that's significant and important and useful to us, if you see perhaps an outbreak of jellyfish, which occurs from time to time. If you see marine turtles, that's always of interest, because they only quite rarely make it up into our waters, and then not usually for very long. We're interested in injured or stranded marine mammals. You can report it to the British Divers Marine Life Rescue and these other organisations as well. The UK Cetacean Strandings Investigation Programme. Your local authority also handles the disposal of dead marine mammals, and they collect information as well. And the ISPCA are interested in all those things. If you find any of these specified marine invasive non-native species, like Chinese mitten crab or sargassum weed and various other ones, we would like details of where and when and who found it, and what was done about it, and so on. So we're very keen to get information from yourselves, from the public, on all these issues. And that is the last slide. So I can open it now to question and answers if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, we had a few questions come in while you were giving the second half of your talk. So I think we're in for some interesting discussion. So we'll go back to bass. Let's start back at bass, Stephen. And Caroline was asking, in fact, it's related, I think, to the Bangor University slide that you put up. As well as the research they're doing, is there any monitoring of bass in the D estuary that you are aware of?
I'm not personally aware of anything in the D estuary other than these programs that have been started. Joe, can you say anything on the monitoring of bass up and down the district?
Not really any more than you said, Stephen, although it is the D estuary is a bass nursery area. So there are increased regulations surrounding bass in the D estuary.
Okay, thank you for that. And then jumping onto the bait digging, Tony was asking if you have any push in your region to control bait digging, which I think you may have answered in your slide, but I don't know if there's anything more, Tony, you feel Stephen needs to comment on, or do you feel Stephen covered that point?
I don't think we're finding any direct pressure to bring in regulation. Sometimes landowners have been a bit concerned, if there's a lot of crab tiles being put out and that sort of thing, they can try and limit it, and as landowners they may be able to do that. But we're not. I don't think we're finding any stronger push than that in terms of regulation. Okay,
thank you. And also, Tony was interested to know, have you seen any bluefin tuna up in the northwest? We've got them. We've got hundreds of them down in the southwest. They're off the west coast of Scotland. They're obviously off the west coast of Ireland. Have any come up through the Irish Sea and arrived with you?
I think very occasionally. I mean, penny numbers, no more than that. Have you got any records, Joe?
I don't know, unfortunately.
Last time I asked about it, there had been 1 or 2 sightings. That's all.
Okay, that's good. Okay, and I don't think I've got any more questions. We've got some good chat on the chat box, so thanks everybody. But I can't see any more questions. Has anybody else got any questions if they want to put their hand up? Okay, I don't seem to have any more. So I'd just like to thank you, Stephen and Joe, for an excellent presentation.
You got one, Stuart.
Tony's put his hand up.
Yeah,
Tony.
go quick.
Nevin, can you unmute Tony? I unmute Tony.
Hopefully done that, Stuart.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thanks, Nevin. Thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. I'm not trying to steal our chairman's copy here, but it's interesting that each IFCA is different and what drives it is different and its experiences. And you're very much manufactured, I feel, my view, by your history and your area. But I'll make the point to you that I think it'd be worth keeping contact with local fishermen who are the eyes and ears on the beach and on the sea when it comes to climate change. We are going through, in my neck of the woods, dramatic changes of species. I mean, bass are 2 a penny where I am. We can catch more bass than we can mackerel, but it's really changing fast. And I would just urge you guys to monitor it from a scientific point of view, because I think the next 5 years are going to be very, very interesting. But thank you again, Stephen. I really enjoyed your conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think you're right. I think it's kind of coming. It hasn't hit us yet, perhaps, the major effect that climate change is likely to have. The sea level rise hasn't really hit us yet, but I've no doubt it will. And you're right, we do need to put resources into monitoring it, keeping records of it where we can, and we are in a position to do that. Yeah, I'll have a discussion with the science team as to what we could bring in terms of monitoring and recording of impacts of climate change. I'd be very interested to see your sort of list and your own records of what species you think are being most affected, you know, apart from bass, which is perhaps the obvious one.
If I'm allowed to come back, I would say I attended a conference just before COVID, Samaris. It's a conference about protecting thornback rays held with the French at Canterbury. And we could walk to France on thornback rays where I am. It's hardly an endangered species, but they were very concerned. It shows you how fast things have moved in certain areas, and it's worth tracking that. But again, I don't want to hold you up, but thanks to the Anglian Trust for doing this. It's been a very interesting exercise. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you, Tony. And also, I mean, I would agree with what you're saying as well. Certainly from the discussions we have within the Trust and within our Marine Advisory Group, we're seeing a lot of species movement around that hadn't seen before. Not only, you know, we've mentioned bluefin, they've come back, part because the stocks are healthy, but also because they're moving because of climate change with their prey. But also a lot of apex predators, a lot of shark movements. We're picking up sharks where we didn't see them, and some of you may have seen the news stories about sharks in the Thames estuary this week. So there's a lot going on out there, definitely. But I think we've run out of time for this evening. So
I was just going to say, I would be very interested to know work that's going on. I don't know where the main sort of scientific, you know, the way university scientific groups are monitoring this sort of information. It would just be good to bring it together and to have a sort of central record of it, so we could keep tabs on it.
Well, if I can give you a name, Stephen, speak to Will Wright. He's the chief officer of the Kent and Essex IFCA. I know Will.
Yeah.
And he is a scientist anyway. And he's been very heavily involved in working on the 2Seas European project. And I've got a lot of time for Will. He's a very knowledgeable chap. And you might learn a little bit from him about what's going down here and what's coming in your direction.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as I say, I will. I'll have a chat with Will next time we meet, which we do regularly.
Okay. Well, it's heading towards 8:30, so I'm going to thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Joe, for excellent presentation and for answering all our questions. And I thank everybody, actually, for what I think has been a really interesting discussion and debate around some of the issues you've raised. That actually is the end of our sort of IFCA tour of England. So that's the 9th sort of IFCA presentation we've had. All of them have been really interesting and stimulating, and I think it's been you know, a great step in helping improving a relationship between ourselves as recreational sea anglers and yourselves as IFCAs, and it's something we're going to continue to build on next year, and indeed in next year we'll be having a virtual forum with the Association of IFCAs, which is the, I don't know, I wouldn't call it the governing body, is it? It's almost like the trade body for IFCAs, and I know Les Weller, who's on this call, will be part of that presentation, so we can look forward to that. But I will also say this is not the last virtual forum we're having this year. We've actually got 2 more before we finish for Christmas and we kiss goodbye to 2021. And they're actually really quite close together, but they're both really worth attending. So on the 2nd of December, we're going back to our shark series. And we will be looking at angel sharks, particularly off the Welsh coast this time. So we're popping over into Wales to look at some of the research work that's going on with angel sharks and how sea anglers have been heavily involved in supporting that research work and carrying out citizen science and you know, contributing to our understanding and knowledge of angel sharks. And then a week later, on the 9th of December, we will continue with the debate that's actually been happening a little bit in the chat this evening, which is that we're going to have a virtual sea angling forum on the sea angling diaries. The Angling Trust is now sort of officially, and we will be doing some media around this, but is really supporting and pushing the sea angling diaries to as many sea anglers as we can Caroline is clearly a big champion and fan, as she's been commenting on the chat this evening. And I'm sure, Caroline, you'll agree with me that it's really, really vital that sea anglers get involved. The more data, the more knowledge we can build up, the more we can promote sea angling, its social, its economic benefits, as well as its environmental protection. Sometimes as well, the more we can use it as sticks to beat IFCAs and DEFRA and the MMO and others with, to help, you know, protect and represent our interests. So, so do come along to that on the 9th as well. I mentioned at the beginning, this was recorded and filmed. So we will be posting this, as we've done with all the others, on our website. That really works for us, because there are many people who would have wanted to be here this evening and haven't been able to make it. So they have the opportunity to view this presentation on the Angling Trust website for posterity. So do, if you missed anything, do go and have a look at that. And also feedback is really important. How have these gone for you? What could we do better? And importantly as well within this, what else do you want to talk about? What do you want to hear about as part of these sea angling forums? Because Nevin has been doing a great job on organising these, but ultimately these are your forums. So we really do want to hear what you want to discuss around sea angling, whether that's particular challenges, whether that's particular you know, species that you're interested in, whatever it is, we want to hear from you. And on that as well, if you haven't signed up to our sea angling newsletter, which comes out monthly, then please do that. You can find the details on the Angling Trust website. Pop in your email address and we'll make sure you get our regular monthly newsletter. So finally, thanks again to Stephen and to Joe for a great evening. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in December. So thanks, and have a great evening, guys.
Okay, I'll just clear everybody out for us, just so we can catch up, guys, and that's pretty much there. Okay, gents, as far as I can tell, I think it's just us left now. Nevin, Joe, Steve, yeah, Stuart. Okay, so one thing I will just make sure is that I turn off the stop the recording